Welcome to Deep Look, Ultiworld's weekly radio show about the current state of Ultimate. I'm the host and the editor of Ultiworld, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me is Ultiworld senior editor Keith Raynor. Club Ultimate is back, baby. Pro Elite Challenge. It's in the books. And we got some exciting games. We've seen some sweet highlights. Oh man, Keith, it feels like we're fine. Now it feels like we're back. It sort of felt like it for a while, but like now that we have an actual club tournament and like the club previews are out, I'm starting to be like, okay, we're doing this again.
I'm maybe a little more tempered.
Okay. Okay.
I'm excited that Club Ultimate's back. Don't get me wrong. It's nice to see clips coming out on Twitter. Shout out to USA Ultimate. Social media's out there grinding.
Just hired a new digital marketing / social media person.
And you could tell. So it was great to see highlights and Ultiworld Live going on Twitter. Like I definitely was excited. You know me, I'm always a bit of a wet blanket when it comes to early regular season club. But it's weird because on the one hand, you're like, it's exciting to have it back, but then you also you see there's no women's division teams or whatnot. It's It's a weird thing where the marks of it being such a long break and of it having such an adverse impact on the community are still there, but the element of hey, we are back playing and this is high level Ultimate again. That part's exciting. So it's a weird contrast for me.
Your champions this weekend in the men's division, Sockeye gets the win. It wasn't a clean sheet by any stretch. They lost twice, in fact, on Saturday in pool play, but then came out and looked very sharp on Sunday. They beat Lotus in quarters 15-12. They beat Pony 15-10 in semis, and they beat Johnny Bravo 15-11 in the final. So that's how they begin their title defense. And over in the mixed division, Shame goes undefeated and really cruised, to be honest. I mean, I think their closest game was 15-11 in the final against a very good Arizona mixed team, which we talked a little bit about on the show last week. I'm excited to see what that team can do this season. Can they make a splash in the Southwest? Well, we're going to talk more about the tournament and all the action a little bit later in the show. We're going to talk with our reporter on the ground in Colorado, Isabel Cruz. She will join us to discuss everything that she saw and what we can learn from this weekend. We're also going to be talking with Pony's Jimmy Mickle later in the show. Always great to talk to Jimmy. Looking forward to hearing what he has to say about PEC and getting back on the field. And, we're talking about one of the best players of the generation. So can he get back to his 2018 level and lead Pony to another championship? Something to watch for. Keith, also, it was a crazy weekend in the AUDL. I feel like I say that almost every weekend.
It's been a wild year, that's for sure.
It really has. If you look at the standings right now, would you have guessed before the start of the season, Keith, that your leaders in the three divisions are San Diego? Okay, all right, yeah, they're good. They went to playoffs last year. Might have been Dallas, but yeah, San Diego makes sense. DC Breeze and the Minnesota Wind Chill. That's where we stand about halfway through the season.
Would I have guessed? Obviously, because I'm a genius savant of ultimate predictions. But would I, in the general, human sense, all people? Yes. It's a pretty shocking result for the general ultimate populace. But for the professionals, for the experts here, Sixers over Riot. Just plug it again.
You're gonna just ride that for years, aren't you?
Forever.
It was a great pick. Well, we will also talk about the AUDL and what's going on there. Obviously, we'll make our picks, and just a really crazy weekend. Chicago goes 0-2. Dallas loses to Austin again, and Atlanta gets exposed.
My AUDL picks have actually been pretty bad recently. I mean, I've been on the Chicago's best team in the league train, and womp womp.
Well, we'll get to it a little bit later on. Our subscriber bonus segment this week, it's going to be fun. We're going to be taking a look at kind of where things stand in the AUDL awards race.
We're basically at the mid-season point.
We
can basically do some mid-season awards.
Time to start looking, who's going to win MVP, who's going to make all AUDL teams, who's been surprising, who's been underwhelming. We're going to talk about all that in our sub bonus segment. So we hope you'll join us for that. Right now, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk with Isabel Cruz about the Pro Elite Challenge and the restart of Club Ultimate. Stay with us. Joining us now on Deep Look is Isabel Cruz out of Denver, reporting for us this weekend at the Pro Elite Challenge / Colorado Cup. I feel like teams call it Colorado Cup, and it's like people try to make it Pro Elite Challenge, but really the teams are like, I'm going to Co-Cup. Isabel, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
So first and foremost, this is the first major club tournament since Club Nationals in 2019, basically. You were there. What was the vibe like? What was the feeling on the ground in for this first tournament back post-COVID?
Yeah, the feeling was nothing short of incredible. I think the sideline energy was some of the biggest sideline energy I've seen at a tournament in a long time. People were doing some just normal things, catching, throwing, and people were just so hyped to see their best friends out there crushing it and playing with teams from across the country. So it was really a beautiful event. Even though it went well for some and not as well for others, I think everybody was just super happy to return to the sport we all love so much.
So it was palpable. Like, it didn't feel like your normal club tournament. It really felt like there was something different in the air.
For sure. Yeah, especially on Saturday. Even when teams lost, they sort of walked off the field and were like, we get to play together. This is beautiful. When I was talking to a lot of teams, I repeatedly heard the phrase, like, it's a win-win. Like, either we win or we get to play with these people who we haven't gotten to see as much during this time. So it was truly, I think, a really special event. I was lucky to be on the sideline.
I think this could be something that helps people capture that feeling more in the future. It's like easy to take it for granted until you can't play for a year. So that's cool to see. We saw a similar thing at Richmond Cup, a little bit more of a casual tournament in some ways, but all right. So let's talk about some of these teams, and I want to start with Seattle Sockeye. Coming off their 2019 championship. They come out and they actually lose a couple games on Saturday in obviously a very tough pool, but then go on to win the tournament. Did you notice an obvious difference between the Sockeye Saturday and Sockeye Sunday? And if so, what was that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. You could definitely tell they were a little bit on their heels in that first game against Condors. For Saturday, but I got the impression, which sort of I think was a good precursor for Sunday, that Saturday was really a development day. It was a day to get a lot of their new players on the field, get back into the swing of things, and Sunday was really the day where they were going to ramp things up. And so I think that they learned a lot clearly on Saturday and really applied that by their dominance on Sunday. It was exciting to see that, and I think that they were also really happy to play with a lot of their new development players as well who crushed.
Did it seem like they tightened up lines on Sunday?
I think that they did tighten up their lines on Sunday, but they did give, I think, a lot of their sort of new tier of development players some pretty big play opportunities in quarters, semis, and in the finals. And those players delivered. I know Coach Michael Caldwell really wanted to emphasize Declan Miller, who's one of their development players, got 2 layout block Ds in the finals on Sunday that were really pivotal in getting some of those breaks that got them that win in the end.
It's a good way to go from practice player to rostered player.
Yeah. See, he's young. He's really young. He's 17, I think.
It's certainly a name I've heard. And I don't know that every community, every club team is going to have the resources to necessarily copy this model if it works out for Sockeye. You know, not everybody has the Seattle scene to provide young players. You could go to an elite club tournament and get a couple layout blocks, but we'll see if other people try and copy that. You know, we saw Sockeye, I think one of the biggest matchups we were looking at was them matching up with Pony, the previous title winner before Sockeye, and they lose by one. I think they actually scored in the cap, so it wasn't actually a double game point if I remember correctly. They lose by one in pool play to Pony, but then when they meet Pony on Sunday, very different result. Were there specifics aside from the rotation that you felt like changed for Sockeye going into Sunday?
That's a great question. I think that I might honestly more attribute it to sort of a change in Pony than even a change in Sockeye. I think that Sockeye definitely turned up the intensity, and there was a really, really long point at the beginning of the Sockeye Pony rematch in semifinals that I think really set the tone for the game, in which Sockeye came out victorious in that point and brought a lot of energy that I think helped them continue to dominate the game, whereas Pony really came into that first matchup on a high and with a lot of energy that I think that they weren't able to get back from a mental toughness perspective after being a little bit on their heels in that semifinals game. So I think that will be an interesting thing to see throughout the season, how both of them do with that.
And what else did you see? You know, we had Bravo making the final, Condors also competing, you know, getting real solid wins. And then, you know, maybe we'll talk best of the rest. But, you know, from those two teams, Bravo and Condors, who looked impressive? Did they both? Does it feel like one is in a different spot than the other? Just curious for what you saw.
Yeah, I feel like it's going to be hard since this tournament both was like a lot of people's return with really competitive teams. Plus, without that pressure of rankings, I think that a lot of teams were really treating this more as a time to get chemistry rather than really try to start working a system. I think both teams looked really good. I think Condor started off really strong on Saturday, obviously, with their win against Sockeye. But I think that Bravo really displayed sort of a growth in confidence and a growth in chemistry throughout the tournament as they sort of really figure out chemistry and roles within in their roster, giving some new roles, I think, to some existing players and also bringing some new players into the fold. I think on Bravo, I think Cody Spicer had a lot of really big plays and had a big play that ended up being very controversial and didn't end up getting them a turnover that they really needed in the end in the finals, but he had some really big Ds. And I think Mark Rawls is always just a fun player to watch on Bravo. I didn't watch Condors as specifically, so I can't shout out any of their players, but I think that their squad looked really good overall. And I think as the tenor of play and the stakes start to change throughout the season, I think that that's really more when we'll start to see some of the glimpses of what these systems are going to look like as the season goes on. So it's hard to say.
Charlie, are you still holding some of that Cody Spicer stock you bought a couple years back? Because
it is a travesty that team didn't get back to nationals because he's so good, and you see it there. Finally, he's playing Bravo, and boom, he goes out there and has this blow up weekend, and like I am not surprised. He was built for the club game. He was destined to do big things. What did you think about that play? By the way, he got a blue card for what looked like a block over the top of Christian Foster for Sockeye. You think it was a foul? Do you think it was a blue card?
I can tell you the team certainly didn't think it was a foul. I don't know if you heard the boos, the resounding boos off the sideline, which were a little interesting. I mean, obviously I didn't have very good perspective. I was like in a shade tent on the sideline. But I think that different players have different interpretations of the contact rules. I don't know if I would have called it a foul, but again, I wasn't there, so I like on the field. So it was definitely an interesting play, to say the least.
Christian Foster involved in a heated call. I'm shocked. Never heard such things before.
He did play really well in that game, though.
He certainly has always been a talented player, but has attracted some controversy in his career. Were there teams from the rest of the field that you felt impressed with? You know, I think we really didn't know what to expect from outside of that power pool A, was there anybody who jumped off at you and looked like they could maybe be somebody who could contend at regionals this year?
Yeah, I think that that's an interesting question. I think we saw sort of two newer teams in the men's space in Colorado, with Fungi and with Lotus. I think that both of them had really good showings, even though Lotus obviously won't have Jonathan Nethercutt throughout the rest of its season, but I think that their squad did really well with some of the Mama Bird members. But I think that a team that did a little better than I expected was ISO Atmo. I think that there's always sort of a bid for power in the men's scene in Colorado between the teams that aren't Bravo. And I think ISO Atmo really displayed a strong show of athleticism and strong intensity in this tournament that I think might be interesting when they play rivals like Conception and Fungi and Lotus sort of as the series continues on later in the season.
You think the Killjoys out of Utah have a chance to make any noise? I mean, they went 4-2, lost to Lotus in the last game of consolation, played Pony within 3. Does this team have a chance of doing anything in the Northwest?
Yeah, they definitely came out with really high energy and some really big, intense plays. I think it's hard to say in the quarterfinals because I think that some of the top-seeded teams were playing maybe more open lines than they might play when those teams if those teams were to see each other again. But I do think that they're a team to watch. I think there's a lot of teams to watch this season as there's sort of a lot of growth from the pause, and a lot of teams and regions were able to try to be more intentional and grow sort of new programs as Ultimate starts back up again.
Well, let's turn our attention to the mixed division. Shame going undefeated and kind of backing up what we saw from them at the 2019 national championships. And Shame is such an interesting team because they are kind of fun-loving, free-spirited, not taking themselves too seriously, and then yet they go out there and they win a lot of games. So does it feel like Shame picked up right where they left off?
Yeah, I would say they did pick up where they left off, and I'd say that they have picked up in an even stronger place than where they left off. I know that they've always been a team that has brought really high intensity and a lot of cheekiness to Ultimate. That is sometimes controversial for some, but always fun to watch for me. I have a lot of friends on that team. But I think that they never have goals. They're Shame. That's not their thing. But I think that they do have that weight of knowing how they can compete and really wanting to get as far as they can. So you can start to see some of that gelling in how they play and them starting to be a little bit chillier on offense, a little bit more strategic on defense. And I think that that's going to be really interesting as they hit the series later in the season to see sort of if they're able to keep things cleaner, but still really intense and fun like they usually do.
I was notedly a bit skeptical of the team, thinking that they wouldn't have some of their key players who handled a lot of the central offensive roles last year, but they came out and really delivered. And Nick Lance is on the roster this year.
I'm telling you,
who do
he
you
was
think
not on the
stood out
roster when we recorded our last show, Keith.
He was not on the roster.
They
don't hold it against me, folks,
minute,
who are
which was a
Shame
sneaky
fans.
move by them. So anyway,
Can you expect any less?
Sorry.
He might not have known he was going to play until Friday. Who knows? Yeah, I mean, the fun thing about the Shame roster is when you look at it, and as somebody who plays with and against their players a lot in league and in other ways, like they put on a lot of lines that you look at and are fierce, from the big names to sort of some people who other people might not recognize. I mean, obviously Jade McLaughlin is like a super intense player, and I think that she has grown a lot and was really a playmaker, but also a huge team player this weekend, and will continue to be a really pivotal part of their play going forward. Kira Lindgren did really well with like using her small stature to make some really big blocks and plays. And I think that she'll continue to be a really dominant part of their play going forward as well. I mean, Joe Smash Anderson, always a fun player to watch. There were some points where there were some interesting plays made on him that generated turnovers, but looking at the intensity on his face and his hunger for the disc he's always able to get discs back. And I think he's going to continue being a really central player on that team. And obviously John Snyder, who had, I think, one of the best weekends of his life in his own words.
Wow.
Yeah, his play in the final game was like unreal. He had no turnovers, 5 collective assists and goals, and won the game on a Callahan. I mean, he's almost ready to retire, but he won't. And I think he'll be another pivotal part of some of gelling their offense to be a little bit chillier while still playing with hammers and those fun deep looks that they like to do.
Legitimately, this roster that we see now is a lot better than the one we saw before the tournament. There's a name on there that I didn't see before the tournament too. I'm wondering how much he played and if he had an impact. Bart Watson. Bart, he's kind of a legend of the game. I haven't seen him on a club roster in a few years.
It's one of my all-time favorite players.
Was he playing much, and was he effective?
Yeah, I think I didn't see all of their games, but I know that he did play some this weekend. I'm not sure he played the entire tournament, but I know he's personal friends with a lot of people on the team, and then I think is really excited to play the specific Shame brand kind of ultimate with them. So I think he'll be an interesting addition to their roster, which has some really young players and some older, really established players that all really gel well together.
Shout out to Alex Daniels and the Albuquerque crew. Isabel, you may not know this, but I'm from Albuquerque.
Oh, I know.
So that's my squad out there. I probably don't know the other Albuquerque players on the team, but that's like a legitimate part of the squad right there.
Oh, it's a huge part of the squad for sure. A
Awesome.
lot of fun players.
Well, another Southwest community like Albuquerque that's maybe been overlooked that had a big weekend, and maybe in some ways this is the biggest story out of the mixed division this weekend. It's the team that lost to Shame in the finals, the Arizona mixed team. I honestly was like, maybe this is just kind of like a one weekend thing, and that's why their team name is Arizona Mixed One. Like, they're not a real team, but the sound of it is that not only are they good, and there's some players whose names I recognize, who I've seen play, who are quite talented on this team, but they may be in it for the full year. What was your impression of Arizona Mixed from their performances?
Yeah, Arizona Mixed was definitely, when looking at all of the teams that were coming, one that a lot of people had questions about, but definitely looking at their roster, it was kind of interesting. And hearing the story about how they came together was really fascinating for me. And I think really emblematic of what this time that was really painful, but also very generative and ultimate for some ways in the pandemic can do. When the Arizona community really came together and decided that they wanted to develop their community in an intentional way by creating sort of these tiered squads that all were sort of in service of the same goal of really gelling the Arizona ultimate community while trying to optimize competition and continue to really foster community connection and cohesion. So this Arizona Mixed One is sort of the new A team that was put together by this external selection committee. It's like a whole process that they went through in Arizona that's really driven by community that I thought was really kind of inspiring and sort of an interesting take on the future of Ultimate. Well, anyway, they certainly are in it for this year, and they're certainly in it to do their best to make it all the way. So they'll definitely be a team to watch, as many of them sort of started to figure out their roles and come together with team chemistry. I think once they really figure out their system, they're going to be a fun team with really strong athleticism to see how they do in the series.
Any notable performances from specific players on this Arizona team?
Yeah, I think they have a lot of young players who are sort of newer to the club scene, but are super strong athletes. Meredith Bile, who is a young player who has, I think that the way that they put it was a super high ceiling of where she can go, had some really critical blocks and bookends in the semifinals. She did really well, and I think she's a player to watch. They highlighted Carl Morgenstern, who he sort of was running around the field doing a lot every time I peeked over at that field. And then they have some of their established players, like one of their captains, Cody Lippincott, who's also on the Sidewinders and is always just one of the most fun and really athletic players to play in this region. So a lot of fun people to watch on that team.
And
they've got a shot. I mean, the Southwest has 2 bids. We don't really know what to expect. Lotus didn't exactly have a great weekend. We really don't know what we're going to get out of Polar Bears of Mischief. Like, it'll be tough, but certainly there is a shot for them. What were the other teams that really stood out? I mean, there's so many teams here that feel like you could talk about, whether it's, Love Tractor having a tough weekend, Kansas City United plus Cami Groom playing really well, Toro, coming off of Raleigh, like how they looked, our Richmond Cup, excuse me. Which teams do you feel like stood out to you in a big way?
Yeah, I think it's hard. I don't know. I feel like there's so many teams that like really put their all on the field this weekend that the mixed division was just so fun to watch. I think Toro definitely came out with a lot of energy. They were a team that got behind a little bit in a lot of key games and then really rallied to make for some incredible ultimate, like their universe point win in the quarterfinals was really exciting. And also sort of their play with Loxa, even though the score might not show it. I think that those two teams were really tightly matched and had a really fun dynamic. Yeah, Toro, I think, is coming up with a new squad with a lot of newer players that have a lot of potential. I know that the captains really wanted to highlight Georges Suh and Andrew Lee. And then I think established people on that team, like Hannah Zimmerman, had just like, every time I looked at that, at their fields, she was making some kind of dut block or laying out like at shoulder level. She's just such a dominant player on that team. I think Moondog was another really fun team to watch. I know that they've sort of done some upsetting in the past and are just sort of another team that really puts the fun in their play while really also trying to be strong athletes and succeeding very well at being strong athletes. Yeah, I think Love Tractor was an interesting team to watch this weekend. They certainly came into this tournament, I think, with a tryout mindset, as I think they had like 8 or so players that aren't necessarily securing roster spots, but I think that that's sort of up in the air. But they definitely didn't have the chemistry or sort of the defensive intensity that I've seen them have as somebody who's watched them play and played against them on teams. And so as the team comes together, they finalize their roster and they sort of take some of the lessons of this weekend. It'll be interesting to see how they come up against some teams that have some really strong momentum in this region in going forward. So that'll be an interesting story to watch for Love Tractor as well.
Kansas City United went 5-1, and a lot of great players from Kansas City, including a name that we haven't heard associated with Kansas City in a while, Cami Groom. Is she planning to play with them more this season? Do you know what the deal is with this KC United team?
Yeah, KC United was definitely, I'm glad you all are highlighting them. They were a super fun team to watch this weekend. Cami Groom will not be playing with them. She's committed to Brute Squad, but has been in that area and so has been practicing with them. And I think calls many of them friends. So she was really there just in a supportive role this weekend. But I think that that team had really great chemistry and I think was able to dominate in a lot of ways this weekend, even as a squad that's a little bit older than some of the teams that they were playing, with really smart play and also just like incredible athleticism. I think that they also are a team with really high hopes for the season, coming together as teams that like I think it was Prairie Fire and Wicked that had done well in the past, but I think it was sort of a 2-year process that brought this Kansas City United team together, and that they have some really high hopes playing together as friends who are super talented at Ultimate and have high ambitions for where they can bring their play to hopefully clinch a bid going forward.
This mixed division, just looking at the tournament, it's like as a whole, just what we've come to know. The reputation I feel like the mixed division has built for itself. Unpredictable, up and down results. I mean, we've seen Love Tractor go out and look like the best team at tournaments in the same season that they've also got blown out in multiple games. So it's like, no, even with this tryout squad and this early season moment, I'm not ready to write them off. In the same way, like Kansas City United, they could go out and not play nearly this well at their next tournament, despite what their talent level may be. It's just, this is all par for the course, I feel like, in mixed, maybe even as much as ever, with this kind of unusual setting for a season to start.
Definitely.
So, as we look around the mixed division and wrap up here, were there any teams that you feel like surprised you on the downside that weren't in as good a spot as you expected them to be? I don't know how much expectation you had coming in or how much anybody has really. Like I picked Love Tractor to win this tournament, and then they went 1-2 in pool play and looked a little shaky. And like we saw, just like a mixed bag of various things, and, players picking up that aren't going to be on the team in the future. So there's like all kinds of question marks, but any teams that feel like maybe are not in as good a spot as you thought they might be this point in the year?
Yeah, it's hard to tell because I think that the attitude towards this weekend was such that I think that a lot of players and teams were taking risks, and some of those risks were rewarded with really strong results, and some of those risks were not rewarded, right, with some upsets. And so I think teams that didn't play as well as potentially were expected, like Cocktails and No Touching and Love Tractor, I'm hesitant to say that they're on the downswing, because I think that even though some of the games, you can tell that some of those teams hadn't quite gelled with team chemistry, but had a lot of really strong components. But I think that as some of the pressure comes on with regard to rankings and with regard to sort of, trying to make it to nationals, I think that hopefully throughout the season that they will figure out the lessons from this tournament, which is, I think, mostly what many of these teams entered this tournament with, right, was really trying to figure out where they need to go to get to be at the level that they want to be going forward this year. So even the teams that I don't think performed as well as one might expect, I think in many ways that could be very generative rather than sort of setting teams on a downswing because of sort of the experimental nature of what a lot of teams were trying out this weekend.
All right. My last question. Can shame win a national championship?
I think so. But don't let them say it. Don't tell them I said that. I guess they can hear. But I think that they're out there. They're trying to honor Sass. Their late teammate. They're trying to play the best ultimate they can play while maintaining their really unique sense of culture and style. One could say. I think they could do anything they set their minds to. The question is, what will their competition look like this year? So it'll be definitely interesting to see how the rest of their season goes. But I don't count them out for anything.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Isabel Cruz, with us here on Deep Look. Really appreciate your insights.
Thanks so much for having me, and have fun with the rest of the podcast.
Thank you.
Bye.
We'll be right back. Swag alert. Look at these new jackets. We've got these jackets from A Glimmering Wreck. Customized. We got the college drip here. Look at this. New York, NYU, Purple Haze. We got the patch on the sleeve, Keith. We got the Jimi Hendrix Statue of Liberty. I mean, this is very crispy, and it's going to be in my fall wardrobe.
Absolutely. I mean, I jerseys. I got so many jerseys. I got hoodies and all that stuff, but like, here's something I can wear. Like, I feel like I can wear this out. I feel like I could go out with the drip and look nice, not even just at the fields, like after the fields, before the fields. I feel like I can look good anywhere in this. I got this like stitched on tackle twill, so it's not like printed or sublimated or whatever like that. I got a nice quality, warm fabric.
It legitimately is something that you could wear out, like in New York City. Like I'm going to wear this out in New York City, 100%, and fully customizable, kind of like a 90s style. It's very cool. It's got the snap buttons. There it is. It's the snap. You hear that snap?
Oh yeah, I hear that snap.
And you've got the Yukon grind with the blue and the silver. I've got the purple and the silver and the white and the black. And you can get a jacket just like this, but customized just for your team. If you go to aglimmeringwreck.com, it's like a sideline jacket. And you know what? They're only $80 a pop. That's a great deal. Like if you got a jacket like this at a store somewhere, it would probably cost more than that.
Definitely. I love this style of jacket. This is perfect for me. I'm hyped to have mine. I'm hyped to wear it out. I'm like almost sad that I got to debut it on this podcast because it's going to be so fire when I wear this out.
I know. In the summertime.
Oh yeah.
But it's the time right now. You order now and then when you get the jackets, cooler weather starting to come around, and you roll up to regionals rocking your custom 90s jackets.
It's got to be worth a win at regionals, right? If you roll up in your whole team's rocking these, like, you're gonna win at least one extra game.
I mean, NYU always got to roll in off the coach buses coming to tournaments. I assume they still do that. Which, if you come out of the coach bus and you're wearing this, you look like you're in a band. Okay, and then boom, you make it happen. So if you're interested in learning more about getting your own jacket, again, fully customizable colors, logos, everything, go to aglimmeringwreck.com. You could search AGW Ultimate as well and find out more. Joining us now on Deep Look is the captain for New York Pony, Jimmy Mickle. Jimmy, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Charlie. Good to be here.
Great to talk to you. The first thing I'm curious to know is, how does it feel to be back on the field?
It feels pretty good. I think I had this conversation with a number of teammates and opposing players this weekend that in a lot of ways it felt like a fever dream. It was kind of like, things we've done so much before, but then felt so removed for a while that, both was incredibly enjoyable and also felt too good to be true at times. So yeah, all in all, I think just incredible to have the opportunity to be back out on the field, to be competing, talking trash, making plays, celebrating teammates, kind of all that good stuff that disappeared briefly. And now it's back. So all in all, it feels really good.
Was that effect noticeable in the way that teams were interacting with one another as far as like a community standpoint? Did it feel like people were really excited to be back, or were they rusty, or both? Like, what was the vibe like?
Yeah, I think a combination of both. I think, I think a lot of moments we could point to and say a lot of rust, and then moments we'd point to and say like, wow, I'm shocked. Like, things look so good after so much time off. So, I think like the vibe with other teams is very much, on the field, things clicked right back into that competitive space. And I think, before games, after games, huddles, like, I think probably a lot more like smiles and just like, happy to be there vibe, that just like, wow, this is like, a little extra special after the last year, and being able to like, take the field together again. I think just like made like a generally awesome weekend into something that I think we'll all remember for a long time.
This was an unusual Pro Elite Challenge in that, there were 4 nationals teams and then a lot of everybody else. Did you feel like it was worth the trip? I mean, you were really the one team that flew a long way. Obviously, Seattle came down and the Condors came over, and I mean, some of the teams lower down in the tournament traveled from a distance. But from an elite side of things, Pony was the one team that really made the big trip. Was that worth it?
Yeah, I think very much so. I think, when we were discussing whether or not we wanted to attend Colorado Cup, I think a couple things came to mind of like what would make it a success. And I think, first of all, like, tournaments are really, really fun. And I think like we'd all just been waiting, chomping at the bit for a while. And like the idea of all traveling together, staying together, and playing a bunch of good games on line fields and in a real tournament format was super appealing. And I think in a lot of ways, a tournament starts a season, like it kicks off, like all of a sudden, like, I can tell even the last couple of days, it's just like, everyone's hitting everything a little bit harder. And it just feels like, it feels a lot more real as the season's underway now that like we had a tournament. And I think in terms of, our pool Saturday was Condors, Bravo, and Sockeye, which would have been like, that's something we could have on as a nationals pool. It's like, you can't really get better competition than that. So I think like, regardless of who was going, it was like going to be important for us to attend a tournament to like really get our season going. But I think like once we were able to chat with the other teams and realize that like we could get some really high quality games and, start to figure out what our season would look like on the field, that like it was, well worth the trip. And I think outside of on the field, just like getting a bunch of time with new people on the team, connecting with those that spent a little bit of time, and just like overall, like incredibly positive experience.
That's pretty smart. The pool idea. I feel like I can already see there being like 3 of these teams in the same pool at nationals. So I'm gonna go ahead and put my call on that. If it comes true, everybody can look back and be like, oh, Keith saw this happening with Jimmy's help. You've sound like this has been a really, really great experience, and the Pro League Challenge has occupied kind of an odd space, I think, in the club season. In previous years, it's like kind of like a preseason tournament, and this year you have less roster restrictions. You have obviously the break coming in, the format. It's all a bit unusual. No rankings. Did this tournament feel like other Colorado Cup / Pro League Challenges have?
Yeah, I mean, it felt very similar to me. I think roster considerations, I think like honestly was pretty helpful to have more flexibility. I think like we were able to bring up a couple practice players. I think Sockeye did the same. I think like, based on, where we're at in the season and like injury status of a number of players and stuff, I think like in a lot of ways that roster flexibility enhanced like our ability to have like a really productive tournament. We didn't have to have discussions around, are we going to hit our limits? Is this too many people to bring on? Who are we bringing for US Open? We're just like, let's get a bunch of healthy bodies to Colorado, and we'll be able to get better there. So I think in terms of like not having rankings, like the reason, this might be different for different teams, but we're just trying to get reps against good teams, and we're trying to identify where we need to get better in all of those kind of things. So like, I didn't feel like teams were playing any different really. I think, one thing I'd note is maybe it allows people to play a little looser lines in some ways where that's not in the back of the mind. Like, oh, if we were to lose to this team who might go lose to these other teams, this could affect us down the line. So, maybe there's a little bit of a pressure lift, but I also think, it felt, once we're back out on the field and competing, no one's really like, this game doesn't matter, right? It's like it immediately snaps into like, we want to beat these guys. So I would say that like small changes, but overall felt very similar to previous Colorado Cups.
All right, so we want to hear about how Pony played. 3-0 Saturday, you beat Sockeye, and then you kind of get smoked by Sockeye on Sunday, 15-10 in semis. So what was the difference there? How'd the team look?
Yeah, I mean, I could probably go on 5-minute rants on what we did well and 5-minute rants on what we did wrong. So
stay tuned for the subscriber bonus, folks. That's
yeah, exactly. No, I think overall we're happy with how the weekend went. I mean, obviously we went in wanting to win. I think Sockeye did a really good job making some adjustments to how we were playing. I think, in terms of like some on the field work we need to do, I think they did a really good job playing force middle against us, against our vert stack. And, I think as a lot of teams, we've only had a couple of practices. We just finalized our roster, end of June, and had a weekend of practice and a couple weeknight get-togethers to like start to put lines together. And I think overall my general sentiment is that our new players, rookies, practice players all like showed up and played awesome. And I think a lot of our returners left feeling like, we're a little rusty and have a lot to get better at. So, I think kudos to Sockeye for, showing up in semis in a way that like, that's the game we came to Colorado to play and like have the pressure put on us and know what we need to fix. And I think overall it's kind of a mix, we're disappointed and know we have a lot to work on, but also know that like it's early July and we don't want to like overreact. So, I think BJ and BBH are probably stewing over the film right now and coming up with some adjustments for practice and so on. But, I think overall I'm happy with where we're at and kind of like, again, I think what's best about this is it feels like our season really got a jump start. So it feels like we are now able to like iterate. We're able to like learn on, look back on what we need to work on and kind of move forward. But I say overall, like everyone's play, I think was a little more subpar than we'd be happy with. I think, from all the teams, I think a lot more turnovers, a lot more like small errors, that I think come with like not only early season, but a season off as well.
When I look at the team's roster, I was surprised by just how much consistency there's been from 2 years ago, one season ago, 2 years ago, with the team. I mean, there's just not a lot of turnover, and not a lot of. I know everybody got very excited about some of the potential names that of folks who are playing in or moving to New York who may have joined the roster, and they may not be there, but a lot of the players who have been really successful with this program are. with the extra time off, does it feel like a lot of the same team, or does it just feel like this is a very new journey from where we were in 2019?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for us, I mean, one of the things I was most proud of and for Pony in the 2020 is like we kind of felt like we had a season. You know, it wasn't like we were playing on the field, but in a lot of ways we like worked to stay connected in a lot of different ways. So I think there's like a big piece of continuity that I think encouraged people in a lot of ways to want to be part of the team again in 2021. It wasn't like a big lapse. You know, we allowed people to take the space they wanted, but we also created opportunities for people to stay involved in a virtual sense. And then as it became apparent, we were able to do things outside and get together in safe ways that like that opportunity was there for people that wanted it. So I think like it does feel new in the sense that like we're all back together and have some new players, but also I think just like the 2020 year, we had a lot of continuity. You know, we were meeting multiple times a week in a lot of different capacities, and we're able to like stay very close. And I think like in a lot of ways it like helped us all get through a rather difficult year. So I think if I had to say, I'd lean on the side of like, you know, it feels like a lot of continuity between 2019, 2020, and this year, which I think will hopefully pay dividends down the road.
You did lose some key players from particularly the defensive side of the disc. The O-line pretty intact. How did the defense do this weekend? And you know, I would love to hear about some specific players, whether offense or defense, you feel like played well or like showed some good signs for later this year.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think coming off our 2019 season, we were able to look back and say like, you know, well, there's adjustments to be made in all parts of the team. Like, I think we felt very confident with our D-line's ability to get breaks and put us in a good spot. And I think we put a little extra emphasis on what the O-line needed to do to like set us up for success. So, I mean, I think the D-line had a really good weekend. I don't think there was a game where we didn't get at least a number of breaks. And I think that was encouraging. I think this weekend we were missing some of, you know, who people would consider some of our like top tier defenders. With Jack Hatchett was out, Marquez was out, Gibran was out, and kind of you can go down the list of like, you know, top end defenders that didn't take the field. Ben Yacht was out as well. So just like a number of defenders, and I feel like everyone kind of stepped up into roles. So I think like a couple specific names. Jeff Holm is a former Chicago Machine player that now lives in New York, who took a lot of our big matchups. He guarded Raider for both of our Sockeye games, was really productive both on the defensive side of the disc, but also scored a bunch of goals once we got the disc. I think, you know, we had I think a lot of like the mainstays that have been on our D line for a while, you know, like Ben Katz is always out there getting blocks you don't expect. I think, you know, Evan Padgett does a really good job on handlers. I think just like you could see a lot of people that have put in work over the last year and a half, like ready to take that field. And I know BJ's spending time like cooking up new defensive schemes. And I think in a lot of ways would have said like we are more simplistic this weekend than we ever will be this year. So a lot to grow on, but I think overall very happy with our D-line's performance.
BJ cooking up schemes? No way. I can't even envision it. How about you individually? How do you feel like you played this weekend? You know, if you had to give yourself a letter grade for your performance this weekend, what would you give yourself?
That's a good question. I guess like, yeah, if this is like in a vacuum and I looked at this weekend without understanding all the other considerations, I'd probably give myself like a D or a C. I think like being a little extra kind to myself and realize we're working our way back into this all. I mean, I might be kind and give myself like a B. Yeah, to be frank, I felt good physically. I felt really good cutting. I felt really good defensively. I think, you know, where I felt like I needed the most work was throwing wise. I think a combination of being away from Colorado for a little while and then, you know, not a lot of throwing to full speed targets left me missing a lot of hucks that I feel like I generally hit. So, you know, nothing to like over index on, but also, you know, it's been a while and that stuff like it takes a lot of reps at that high speed to feel really comfortable. So, yeah, I feel a sense of urgency to get back to where I want to be, but also I feel really good about where I'm at individually. So
there's a lot of players in New York City right now. I feel like there's more of an abundance of great players in New York City than we've had in a long time, even in the 2018 Pony championship year. But a lot of them are not playing for the for Pony this year. So, you've got Ryan Osgar and Jack Williams, who are both, on the New York Empire and the AUDL, but not playing with Pony. Jeff Babbitt is somebody who's left Pony this year, among other names. So, Jimmy, you and I talked a couple months ago about the relationship between Empire and Pony. Are you worried that you're missing out on some of these players, given the fact that you kind of set more standards around having people at practices, having people at tournaments, maybe not making as many concessions to, crossover between Pony season and the Empire season, given that, Sockeye really good. I mean, they almost have no conflicts with the AUDL. But some of the best players in the city aren't going to be playing for Pony this year. Like, how do you look at that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a big challenge for us. I think in a lot of ways, the Empire has been, great for Ultimate in the New York area. I think like a number of, as you mentioned, great players have been drawn here. I think they've been a very successful team, and winning is contagious and good to do. And I think like that atmosphere is good for all of our players to be involved with. And I think also, when there's two teams competing for time on weekends and during the week, and both teams with lofty goals, that it's going to be a challenge. And I think where we landed was basically like, we want to enable players to be able to be part of both teams. We know there's a lot of players on Pony that Empire is a big part of their life, and vice versa. So we put forward effort to be able to make that happen. And I think basically the way that can exist going forward is like, we need to be okay with Empire players missing a few Pony events, and Empire needs to be okay with Pony players missing a few Empire events. And, I think we were able to reach like a really good middle ground that enabled a number of players to play both. And I think, regarding players that like chose to play on a different team, I think, we went into this season understanding that like that was something that could happen. And I think like feel very comfortable with like our process and like where we landed and basically what we drew up for opportunities for players to be involved. So, a lot to say. I mean, like on every club team, regardless of AUDL, you always have like the option that you're always balancing like commitment levels with talent and a lot of other things. And I think, after 2019, what we realized was like, not that we couldn't have some players that like Pony might not have been their like number one priority for a lot of the year, but like that we had made too many individual concessions over and over and over that like left us feeling a little bit less cohesive than we wanted to by the end of the year. So I think our orientation going into this year was like, let's make sure that we have enough people at practice and can get to cohesive reps we want in a way that like allow us to feel really confident. And also I think the big piece for us is like, it's really hard to learn what you need to work on when you don't have your pieces, right? Because you spend your whole time thinking, oh, this will just be fixed when this person's back and so on. So, I think like there's a piece that like we just want some consistency, I think particularly with the O-line to be able to learn where we need to work on things. So, like I would love to have Jack Williams and Jeff and Ryan Osgar on the team. I think like to be frank, like we were as straightforward and honest with them as we could be, and really would have welcomed any conversations about them being involved. And I think, if there was like, a handful of 3 or 4 players who weren't going to be able to join the team in any capacity till end of September, that was going to put us in a tough spot for what we know is going to be a tough regionals and not leave us with enough time to really get cohesive before nationals in the way we want. So, while talent really matters a lot, I also think that like what matters to us as a team is like building this team in a way that we think is like sustainable and is going to make everyone on the team feel valued. And that's kind of what we did.
What's next for Pony? What's next on the calendar?
US Open. So we have, I guess for now at like 3.5 weeks. So practice tomorrow night, practice this weekend. And basically we have kind of our season schedule where we have a tournament about a month of practices, a tournament about a month of practices, and kind of so on. So a good kind of cadence for us to be able to like work and learn from what we just learned.
How good would you say Sockeye is? I mean, are they the team to beat still?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know how you go against that. I mean, not only look at their roster and talented players, but I mean, they're the reigning champions in our division. So I think like until we knock them down, that's where they land. So I mean, I think they set a standard of excellence, and it's fun to be going after them. But while there are a number of other teams, I think like Sockeye in particular is a team that we know will be at the top, and I know a lot of our work will be going into how we defend them and how we get past their defense.
Right. What does your O-line need to work on specifically before US Open?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big thing for us is just like continuing to get like high pressure reps in together. I think like you could tell the level of defense Sockeye was playing on us, in the same way our defense plays on us at practice, is like there's pressure on every single dump throw. And I think like, I think we'll be working in the next couple of practices around being really aggressive with our primary dumps and opening up space for our secondary dumps to come in there. I think we're going to work a lot on attacking deep. I think like it's not unknown to us that like when we miss a deep shot or two that like we'll sometimes tighten up and end up making things harder on ourselves. And I think what we want to work on is like continuing to cut and attack deep, even when those like first early shots might not hit, because even if we're not throwing deep, I think attacking that deep space kind of relentlessly with the versatile players we have is going to open up the rest of the field. So I think we want to keep focusing on like being really aggressive with our reset patterns, and I think like being aggressive downfield. So overall, I guess being more aggressive.
Okay, I have to know, where is Sam Little playing this year?
He's playing on that sweet O-line. So
that's what I'm talking about. That's the adjustment. That's what we need to see.
So awesome. It's good to have him back.
Well, Jimmy, thank you so much. Appreciate you giving us a few minutes, and looking forward to seeing you out there at US Open.
Cool. Thanks, Charlie and Keith. I'll talk to you too soon.
Jimmy Mickle from Pony with us here on Deep Look. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Deep Look. Great to talk with Isabel and Jimmy about PEC and the restart of the season. It's great to hear about how excited everybody is to be back. It's great to have some Ultimate to talk about. And, Keith, when you look at the results from PEC this weekend, what stands out to you?
Well, Shame delivering. That was definitely one of the big ones to me. Although I still, in general, I feel like I want to take this weekend, and not extrapolate too much. We don't want to say I'm
extrapolating.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a lot more fun to extrapolate. I've learned that through even like NBA Twitter, let alone my career at Ultiworld. You might as well just jump on the recency bandwagon because it's a lot more fun to be a fan in that situation. But especially in the mixed division, a lot of first year teams. Although even if we're talking to Isabel, this Arizona team sounds a lot more like this is a lot more level of formality than I thought they might be a pickup team for the weekend. But
this is a real storyline, right? I mean, we have two kind of like borderline good communities when they're split gender. When you have Arizona, they have like a decent men's team, a decent women's team, but they're not going to nationals. And Kansas City, same thing. Wicked's pretty good. Prairie Fire's pretty good. But now both of those communities going basically all in on a mixed team. And, I remember Albuquerque, speaking of Albuquerque, did this a few years ago, and they almost made nationals. I think they lost in the game to go. This is probably 10 years ago now. But this is something that smaller communities can do to become nationally competitive. And I think we're seeing it. Like, that Kansas City team is going to have a chance to get the second bid behind Dragon Thrust into North Central. And this Arizona team absolutely can compete in the Southwest. I think it's going to be Mischief 1, and then you're looking at like PBR, Lotus, and Arizona for that second spot.
I've advocated on the international scene for teams to do this. So like, why couldn't it work on a smaller scale? I definitely think it could. But the mixed division, definitely some interesting results. But Arizona to me and Shame are the things that probably stand out the most. And I'm not too concerned necessarily about like Cocktails or Love Tractor. Maybe a little disappointed in what we saw out of Toro, given the hype that I was putting on them. Maybe it's time to bring it back, dial it back a little bit. But Grayson Sanders still the real deal. In the men's division, even talking to Jimmy and here, there's so many absences I think from these rosters that. Again, I'm not going to put too much weight on it, but at least Sockeye and Pony both still have it in them. They have it in the tank. Sockeye to play this well even with fairly open lines altogether. I think it's a good sign.
Don't forget, they're missing the player of the year, Dylan.
Right, no Dylan.
And they still won this tournament.
Right. So, I mean, if you don't have Sockeye in the title contention, you're crazy. You probably were crazy from the beginning. You're listening to this podcast on borrowed time, but the rest of the division, kind of shook out like I would have expected. Maybe Bravo's a little bit up. While it's cool to see so many of these home teams do well, it maybe is more concerning because it means that all their talent's dispersed, and it sounds like Inception may still be going on. So, like, if you have 4 teams from Colorado, there's no way they're all good. So if they could all come together, maybe they'd have a shot. But I would be worried about them somehow after all this.
Bravo went 0-2 against Pony, 0-1 against 0-2 against Sockeye, and 0-1 against Pony. They beat Condors twice, which I actually think that's kind of notable. I always take this Colorado results with a grain of salt for the Colorado teams because of the altitude effect, throws being a little bit more dialed in. But I still think that, Bravo, especially with all the turnover that they've had, there's a very different looking roster this year. Still some big names, and they pick up some really key players like Jay Frood, as we talked about. And so I think this is a pretty solid result for them. It feels like they're, probably at best a quarters team based on what we know right now. But I think, good sign for them to beat Condors. And conversely, is that a bad sign for Condors? They obviously got the big early win against Sockeye. I don't know how well that stands up when you look at the rest of their results. They end up going 0-2 against Bravo, 0-2 against Pony. They're good, but are they going to be, is this a semis contender? It doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, I'm not sure I see it based on just this weekend. If there was a time you were going to get Sockeye, right, first game of the season is probably it.
Like 2 years.
Right. That's probably the time. So I definitely got to see more from Condors, although they've proven over the past couple of years that they're going to be competitive. I still would expect to see them at the club championships, but it's just hard to imagine them being really in the conversation to get into quarters and be competitive.
Right. Elsewhere, Isabel talked about it already. You look at the final results. Obviously, the top 4 teams were very clearly the top 4 teams, and Lotus comes in 5th place, which is pretty impressive. I know they had the Nethercut pickup, but I think this goes to show you how good this Colorado Mama Bird team's about to be.
Yeah,
that's a team that could win nationals back to back, winter and spring. It's not an entirely Colorado Mama Bird roster, but many of the top players on this team are Mama Bird players, either present or recent past. So I think they went 5-1. They only lost came to Sockeye in quarters, 15-12. That's pretty good stuff. We'll see what happens when they're kind of in the series mode. But in my mind, this is a chance for those Colorado guys to get ready to go, and you got to expect that this is going to put them in a good position come the college series.
I wonder what they're going to do. If you tried to play the club series, then the fall college series, and the spring college series, do you triple peak? That is a lot of mileage, even for young athletic legs like theirs.
I won't be shocked if they skip club regionals.
Right. You got to think one of those things has got to be deprioritized. So I'll be curious to see how they develop that.
Well, all right. Let's turn our attention now to the AUDL. Obviously, got lots more club to come. Next big tournament is U.S. Open at the beginning of August. And it's going to be men's division only because mixed teams are finding their own little tournaments. There's going to be a bunch of really good mixed tournaments this year. They're just not happening on the Triple Crown Tour. I know that Loxa is hosting one. No, Loxa. I'm going to get it right. Yeah. I'm going to put it in my brain. Loxa is hosting one in August. AMP is hosting one in August, and those are going to bring together, East Coast, West Coast for the most part. And so nothing really happening at U.S. Open this year. So, AUDL weekend. It was crazy. What's the craziest thing we saw this weekend, Keith?
Craziest thing. It's a collective, but I think you got to say that it's the union Union disappointing in back-to-back games. Pavlianis throwing a 1-assist game.
Ooh.
That's got to be it, right?
I mean, they going 0-2. I mean, it was a double. It was a road and then a home. And we talked about it last week that this is a great opportunity for Minnesota to steal a win on the road because they'd be catching the Union on a back-to-back. Well, and that's exactly what they did. But the thing is, it's not like it was a cheapie, really. I mean, Minnesota was the better team. They won by 2. Chicago lost by 3 to Madison, Keith. I mean, terrible pick by us to take Chicago to cover against Madison. I think this is just like classic overconfidence and under preparation. Chicago was undefeated. They won their matchups with Madison pretty comfortably. Last week was like a little sketchier, but then they come out here and they get punched in the mouth. And you look at the way that they played, and it's like classic lack of preparation and focus. Their drops, let me make sure I get the number right. Chicago had 11 drops in the game against Madison. 11. That is insane. That's totally unacceptable for a team in the AUDL. And, I'm not saying that's the only reason they lost. Madison played hard. Madison was much more prepared, much more focused, much more adjustments to what Chicago was trying to do. But at the end of the day, if you're going to drop the disc that many times, you're going to lose. And the fact that they didn't adjust and then come out and play hard and, win against Minnesota, like big time wake up call.
They against Madison, they just had it all at the wrong time. You know what I mean? Like, Madison is a team that wants to slow the game down. They want to make it ugly, and Chicago fell for it, right? They played a lot of slow possessions, and all those extra passes turned into ugly drops and ugly throwaways. I mean, they had less throwaways, but they may have been uglier than the drops. I'm talking like, I'm going to blade out of this double team and nobody's home, or I'm just going to like chuck up a huck into nothingness, just like easy, like 10-yard throws to wide open players. I watched them miss. So it was not just the drops. I mean, it was an ugly game, and having to play against a Madison team that's going to make you throw a lot of passes. Usually that feels like I shouldn't say that. It doesn't usually play to Chicago's strength. In fact, I think taking Chicago away from some of the quick strikes that, for them are the momentum builders. That's how they pull away from teams, really, I think, is they go out there and they throw these like 7-6 pass possessions, and they pull away that way. And Madison was not having any of it. KPS was awesome, both in zone and when he was individually assigned to Pavel, and very disruptive. So not a great effort, but a credit to Madison. I think that maybe people are going to overlook that because of all the drops and feel like it was just an unforced errors kind of game, but Chicago was not in their comfort zone.
Yeah. And you got to credit. I mean, Madison plays tough defense. It's never easy to beat them, especially at Breeze Stevens. Minnesota now takes the lead in the Central Division. They're up a half game on Chicago and a full game on Madison, and the only remaining one-loss team in the division. So Chicago goes from being undefeated to being a game behind in the loss column.
They were at the top of my power rankings, and now they're not even at the top of their own division.
It's pretty crazy. By the way, they were never at the top of my power rankings. I just want to point that out. They were not, but if you had been watching how impressive they looked, I mean, they looked like the best team and like they weren't even trying that hard. Yeah, well, I mean, their division is not that good, but now they got the little wake-up call. I still think this team wins the division at the end of the day. They're the best team in the division. I think this is the kind of thing that gets you set up to play better later. Who do they have on tap this weekend? Are they playing?
Let's see.
They are playing at home against Indianapolis. So that's a get-right game. And I think
here's what ails
you. Thump Indianapolis and, get back up towards the top of the leaderboard. Minnesota, on the other hand, Minnesota is at Detroit. And so that will, chalk that up to a win for the wind chill.
The way this crazy season's going, like, who knows,
can't chalk up anything.
You really can't. If we turn around and Detroit beats Minnesota, like, it's just going to feel like par for the course.
Well, we also took Dallas last week to cover the spread against Austin. And what did Austin do? They did it again. They won outright against Dallas. They win 17-16 in an ugly, windy, sloppy, just gummy game. And they ended up losing the next night to Dallas in the second game of the back-to-back, also by 1 goal, 21-20. So ball squarely in San Diego's court at this point, a full game up on both Austin and Dallas. But what is going on with this Dallas team?
Charlie, this is embarrassing. Embarrassing.
It is.
To take like 3 or 4 of the best players from your in-state rival and then lose to them 3 times is embarrassing.
Well, just twice. 2 out of 3.
I guess we're not counting one of those. They lost to them twice. You're down in the standings. I mean, just like, that's like hang your head, like, we're like major media market, the panic from the media, first take lead story, like, it's just bad. It's bad. Everyone's like, is there a problem in Dallas? Do they need to fire the head coach? You know, that kind of stuff. Should we that would be what we're talking about in a major media sense, because this is not good. Now, it's hard because these are all 1-point games, but you win by 1. Even their win was by 1 in overtime. So like any sort of play goes the other way, and they didn't get any wins against Austin. My apologies to Austin for writing them off. I don't think anybody saw this coming, but nope. They've gone out there and done the damn thing multiple times now. Maybe they're like, what are they, Madison Southwest? I don't know. Like they like, let's play it ugly. Let's go out there and get a bunch of blocks. They always seem to come up with big blocks. You know, credit to Austin. I'm not going to say that they're bad. I mean, they're not a legit team.
They might be the second best team in the division,
which is insane. So
I mean, we got a lot of games left. And by the way, it doesn't get any easier for Dallas. They got a road trip this weekend, back to back on the road, flying to Seattle and then down to San Jose. I mean, it is not inconceivable that they go 0-2. It's not. And then like they're basically out of the playoff picture. And like the way things are going right now, this is like do or die time. They can survive going 1-1, but they're on their heels. They're coming up against the Seattle team, which we got to talk about this, by the way.
Oh yeah.
So Seattle,
I kind of forgot about this.
Dallas.
Yeah. Let's talk about it.
2 weeks ago, and multiple players get ejected from the game, and there have been multiple suspensions issued by the AUDL, which none of this even came to light outside of the teams and the people at the game knowing about it, because the AUDL released no information about this. And the only way it came to light is because somebody emailed Sin the Fields, who posted an email to their Twitter that talked about this situation. And it is, in fact, true. 3 players have been suspended for at least a game. I think 2 players have been suspended for 2 games. We're working on a story about this right now. But what is going on when people are being suspended from the game and the league is not issuing a statement about it or acknowledging that this is happening in any way? And it feels like people are actively trying to keep it from coming to light. I don't understand. I don't understand. And like, basically it seems like Dan Emmons of Dallas got a block on Mark Munoz of Seattle and then like walked off while like flexing, you know, which is not atypical when you see defender make a block in the AUDL. But there had been some contact between the players after that point. Now, from this point forward, there's no tape. The production game that's up in AUDL TV, you can't really see what happens after this point, but apparently there was some kind of skirmish, and we don't really know exactly what happened, but there was some shoving, and then multiple players got ejected, and then, you know, the league reviewed the tape and ended up suspending multiple players, but, you know, has said nothing about it. What is that? Why are we in a world where there's no, like, why isn't there like an official statement from the teams, from the league? Like when players get suspended in other professional sports leagues, it's like not only is there video of the incident almost always released or available when it's like an on-field altercation, but you also like get a statement from the league about what happened and like why the decision was made. And instead, it's like been radio silence. What the heck is this?
At least make something up. A swarm of bees overtook the game, so we had to stop filming, and some players could be seen swatting at the bees. Unrelated to that, 3 players have been suspended for unrelated misconduct.
People getting into a shoving match on the field, on a sports field, is not exactly like crazy stuff. And people being suspended for the game for getting into a shoving match, it happens in sports. But you don't have all of the lack of information about this makes it seem like there's something bigger that's like being hidden behind it. Why? I don't understand. Like if you're going through the correct protocols to suspend players for, having some extracurricular activities on the field, don't you want to make it clear that like, hey, this is unacceptable behavior. We don't allow for this in the AUDL. Like that goes against the spirit of the game and the integrity rule. Like that's how you're supposed to present it. Instead, it's just silence.
And you've said it before on this podcast. Nature abhors a vacuum. So now everybody's just left to speculate and make it up. And
that's crazy.
We've heard differing versions of this of the recounting of this event from different people about punches being thrown, about people flexing in other people's faces. So now nobody really knows.
Seems like it's exaggerated.
Right.
There's also wasn't there rumors of police involvement, which I find highly unlikely.
My interpretation of police involvement is that there was literally a police officer there, which is not unusual if you're hosting an event at a high school or whatever. There was a police officer there, and that person stepped in to talk to somebody. Like that's the implication that I've gotten from that.
Wasn't there a thing in the NBA where like a security guard for like a bodyguard for one of the players came in and blew up somebody on the other team who was getting in his guy's face? I'm now forgetting the story.
I don't exactly remember that, but
anyway, the whole point of all this is that these teams are playing again, and Seattle's now at home, and that's going to be like ultra grudge match. And Dallas is on the ropes. They just took one on the chin, and they're staggering around, and Seattle can deal the knockout blow. Wouldn't that be something?
You're making it sound a little too literal.
I didn't mean to go with the boxing reference. You're right. You're right.
I think that both teams are going to be as buttoned up as possible, to be honest with you.
Interesting.
I think everybody's going to be on their best behavior. And if they're not, then there won't be any footage of the game. Game didn't happen.
Scrubbed.
Seattle's for the record though, Seattle is better than I thought they would be. So
they're pretty good.
They're like the best team at the bottom of the standings, like near the bottom. I think. Maybe they're not better than LA. I don't know, but I think they might be better than Boston.
Yeah. I mean, let's talk about Boston. They just lost at home.
More like Boston
to Philadelphia Phoenix, who are coming off a big blowout loss to New York, and we're playing in their second game of back-to-back. This is a bad loss for Boston. It's a very bad loss. And yeah, they were still missing a couple of their O-line cutters. No Tanner Johnson, Orion Cable still out of the country. I just don't think that you can really make excuses after a loss like this. This probably puts them out of the playoffs. They're now 2-4.
They're in a tough spot, and the O-line did not deliver. You look at the key members of that line: Henry Babcock, Benson Oak, 6 turnovers between them.
Not good.
Not going to get the job done, I don't think.
Yeah, not good. I think it's easy to be like, well, when Boston's back at full strength, it's kind of too late.
Yeah.
I don't see this team being able to go get big wins on the road to claw back into that 4th spot. I mean, is it possible? Sure, it's possible, but they have not proved much so far this year. I mean, their best result might be a close loss to Atlanta.
Speaking of,
we won.
We haven't talked about that game.
Well, let's get to the
should have been the game of the week, right? We were on this podcast talking about, these are 2 great offenses. We're looking forward to this high scoring affair, and both teams come out and play a really ugly damn game, and DC controls it. So, what do we know? What do I know?
Well,
6 goals in the first half. The Hustle scored 6 goals in the first half.
Exposed. I mean, I think that this Atlanta... So people forget that Atlanta wasn't that good last year. They were not very good. And yes, they've gotten better, no doubt. They have some key pickups. Davis, Dubs, like, they're a better team. But I've been warning that this team is overvalued, and I think that they got exposed by DC playing on the road. I mean, the DC D-line came out and got 5 breaks, like, right out of the gate. And there was there was a play, Antoine Davis gets layout D'd twice and then doesn't cover on the deep cut, gets scored on, like didn't even run. And like, that was to make it like 8-3 or something. That's bad. That's really bad. Yeah. Like, that's the kind of stuff you gotta like be like, we do not do that. So, I mean, I think, a demoralizing loss, but again, I think these teams that are kind of like undefeated and feeling good, and it's easy to let your guard down, come out and play flat, and you can't do that. You're going to get smoked. I also just think DC is the best team in the league right now. So, Atlanta's got a great chance to come back and get that win back in DC this weekend on this kind of like 2-weekend back-to-back. I don't think it's going to happen, but at least I want to see them be a lot more competitive in the game. I mean, they gave it away early.
You mentioned that Antoine Davis play. That was, I believe, the first game maybe for Ben Green from DC. Shows up, gets 3 blocks, including 2 layup blocks with Antoine Davis in like a matter of moments. So shout out to Ben Green, showing up and delivering for DC. AJ Merriman comes away with 5 blocks. Just really the DC defense showed up. Even when their offense was not at its best. The Hustle are usually a team that can generate some turnovers. There were 35 turnovers between the two teams. So, like I said, an ugly game, but DC controlled it. They were much stronger offensively. Just not a lot to get excited about from Atlanta in that game. And, if you're going to play your worst game in a big spot like that, it's nice that it's only contained to 1 loss, right? It doesn't count for 2 losses or 3 losses or something. It's just 1 loss in the standings. So, like you said, plenty of chances for them to bounce back. But I'm a little worried they're not going to get a lot of chances to play in these big games that are going to set the tone for how they perform should they make it to the playoffs.
It's an interesting weekend coming up for them. They have to play Philly at home. Philly, in Philadelphia, that is. So Philly is undefeated at home so far. Now, obviously, they haven't played a team as good as Atlanta at home yet. And then they've got the next night they play DC in Washington DC. So kind of thing where it's like, okay, road trip, got to go 1-1. I think the danger for Atlanta is thinking a lot about that DC game on Saturday and forgetting that they need to come up and play well against Philly. Philly's good. Philly is not a bad team. Like, New York blew them out, but that's because New York played an amazing game. Philly had a lot of good O points, and New York's defense did a good job to really muck things up in the middle of the game, and New York's offense just obliterated Philadelphia. But I think Philly showing you that they have skills by being able to bounce back, go out, and beat Boston in the second game of a back-to-back. So, Atlanta can't just show up and expect to beat Philly. They're a little too good for that. Greg Martin playing great. Obviously, Sean Mott continues to play great. Their O-line is pretty solid. And, will they throw that zone? How does Philly respond? We will see. I mean, Philly almost beat Atlanta on the road.
Atlanta cannot get caught looking forward, because it's going to be really tough for them for the rest of the season if they lose to Philly. They can lose to DC and still have a shot. But if they lose to Philly, they're in trouble. So they really need to, I think I would put all my eggs in the Philly basket.
Right.
Make sure you win that game. And then if you get the DC game, that's just icing on the cake. You're playing with house money at that point. But you cannot lose that Philly game.
No, you can't. And it's become a big game for Philly. Philly getting that win over Boston at least keeps them in the hunt. I still am skeptical that they're going to have enough firepower to get into a playoff spot, but with four spots, it's possible. Much more exciting in the Atlantic Division in some ways than I expected, and not with the teams that I anticipated. Right, the Phoenix being good is not what I was expecting. I was expecting Boston to be that team that was fighting for that 4th spot, but instead it's going to be Philly. I mean, do you think this DC team is, going all the way to championship weekend? Can they win a title?
They're definitely the team that's playing the best right now. If you had betting odds, like I think people would still pick the Empire as the top team, the team that people expect the most from, and I get that. I totally understand that. There is something that, like, when you dig in the numbers with DC, I don't think you see anything unsustainable, but there's something that just feels unsustainable about the way they're playing. Like, it's just, but maybe this Atlanta game was it. Like, their offense didn't play well, and they still won comfortably. So maybe this was the sign you needed to be like, all right, DC is the real deal. They don't need a pristine offense that's unreasonably efficient. They can go out and win in other ways. So if you weren't a believer, I think this win should start to convert you.
I have been skeptical of their D-line, but I may have been just straight up wrong. I mean, to go in and make Atlanta's offense look that bad, an offense that's been, top in the division maybe, that's impressive. That's impressive. And it's like, it's team scheme. They do a great job of converting. That has been a big thing for them. Excellent conversion rate. I mean, in large part thanks to AJ Merriman and his play. So yeah, I mean, very interesting. We'll see what comes of it. All right, let's make our picks, Keith. It's time to do it. We went 1-3 this week. Stall 7 went 2-3. We're still 3 picks ahead, but we got to pick it up. And we've got 3 games on the line this week. First up, tell us, Keith.
All right, our first game, Austin visiting Los Angeles, and the Soul are -1.5 on the road.
My initial lean is to take Austin here. I think LA is probably the worst team in the division. And the thing is, it's tough to go on the road and get these wins. But Austin now, I think, can smell blood a little bit in terms of that playoff spot. This is a must-win game if you want to make the playoffs. So I want to lay the 1.5. What do you think, Keith?
My first read was also Austin. They beat LA by 2 in Austin. And I was like, okay, I got to stop being skeptical of this Austin team. However, let's look at Austin this year. They go on the road to Seattle, lose by 4. They go on the road to San Jose, they lose by 5. Do we count Dallas as road games? Like, I really, it almost doesn't feel like a road game. They're 1-1. They beat Dallas by 1 in Dallas and then lost by 1 in Dallas. So they had one road trip really, and they went up to Seattle and San Jose and did not look good. So I'm a little concerned about them on the road, and that makes me want to take LA with the points.
Man, it's a tough call, isn't it? I
want to ride the high, like
I don't know. I feel like you're talking me out of it here.
I'm just not sure they travel well enough.
Taking the home team to cover, I think, is a very profitable strategy so far this year.
And in the history of sports betting.
Well, yes. LA lost by 2 at Austin.
Yes.
All right, let's take LA.
All right, we're rocking with LA. Sorry, I know I just said like Austin. I won't be against you.
Should probably be pick 'em or LA even a slight favorite given that. So let's take the value side here.
All right,
go ahead.
We're going to the Central for the next one. We get one of those Detroit. How big will it be? Blowouts. Detroit going to Minnesota. Women chill favored by -11.5. Last time we were on one of these lines, we went with the big blowout, and they did not deliver.
Yeah, Madison. It was Madison -12.5, and I think Detroit lost by 12. So pretty much right there. What are the scores of the Minnesota Detroit game so far this season? Let's take a look at that.
Indeed, let's pull that up.
I got you. Detroit at Minnesota, they lost by 12, 29-17. Detroit at Minnesota. This is their second meeting. So The last time they lost by 12. What's the line? 11.5?
11.5.
Man, I want to take Detroit here.
Oh, me too.
All right, let's do it.
I think we want to do it. This feels like a letdown spot for Minnesota, but a letdown against Detroit is like a 6 point.
I mean, they're going to win. They're going to win comfortably, but it's not going to be by 12.
That's what I'm saying. A letdown is winning by 6 or 7.
Yep, I agree with that 100%. Let's do it. I mean, I think Detroit is like showing a little bit of improvement. That's small consolation prize.
There's just way too little depth.
All right, game 3.
All right, game 3, we are going to New York against Boston here. So New York's traveling to Boston. The Empire are -4.5.
Ooh, wow. That's a substantial spread for the road team. Keith, what's your lean?
Man, so much of it depends on the personnel. We've seen both these teams have like big players in and out. If you're Boston, you've got to be getting up for this game, right? Like there's been so much talk about a potential Boston-New York rivalry, right? And what else do they have left to play for? You know, like you got to go for it, but they just have not played very well. They just have never been the team. I don't know if a single game I've watched them and been like, man, this is the team I thought we were getting out of Boston. Maybe not even a single time. 4.5's a lot, but I think I got to take the Empire.
That's a lot.
It's a big road line.
That's a big number.
The number is what scares me, which I guess is the point.
All right.
It's very, very close.
Before we make this call, I mean, I think New York's going to win the game, but I'm not convinced they're going to win by that much. Like if you look at New York, they beat Pittsburgh by 5 on the road, and Pittsburgh's worse than Boston. Yes, we can agree on that.
Yes.
They beat Tampa at home in New York by just 6. They lost to the Breeze by 3, and that's after beating the Breeze by 1 in week 1. And then they only beat Philly by 7. And that was a blowout game. Okay, they were dominating, and they kind of let Philly get a couple of freebies late. Whatever, it was garbage time, but still, you could imagine that they could have similar garbage time. I think we got to take Boston here. This is just an enormous spread. Boston's going to be highly motivated. I think Tanner Johnson could be back in the lineup, and that probably makes their offense quite a bit better. They get to shift some people back to the D. I mean, I think New York wins, but not super easily. I mean, again, Pittsburgh showing up and only losing by 5. I think Boston is definitely 3 or 4 points better than Pittsburgh. So I want to take Boston here and take the points.
I imagine if we had spreads for every one of these games, like the Empire have not been a cover machine by any stretch.
It's a weirdly trapped game to me in my mind for New York.
Yeah, so maybe you're right. Maybe the line's just too big. We need to take Boston. Although I've just no faith in them.
we have not seen a lot of big covers for road favorites.
Yeah,
this season. And I will, if New York does it, I'll tip the cap and say, okay, you're showing up now. But this New York team doesn't win by big numbers very much, and that's been true for like 3 years.
Let's rock with Boston then.
All right, so there it is. We're taking Boston plus 4.5. We are taking the Detroit Mechanics plus 11.5, and we are taking the Los Angeles Aviators plus 1.5. So we're
dogs all the way.
All dogs this week. Bark, 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 bark. We'll see how it all shakes out. So those are our picks against all 7 this week. All right, that is going to do it for our show. Make sure you tune in for our subscriber bonus segment where we talk about some of the mid-season MVP chatter for the AUDL and player awards, defensive player of the year, that kind of stuff. We've got a lot of stats. We're going to break it all down, talk about the players who have impressed and who from our preseason watch list has not shown up. So join us there. You can become a subscriber for less than $4 a month at ultiworld.com/subscribe. Pro Elite Challenge footage up for subscribers now in video.ultiworld.com for our full and plus subscribers. Look out as well for team packs, which will be on sale this week. All right. Thanks for joining in, everybody. Keith Raynor, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long, and we'll talk to you next week right here on Deep Look.